It is happening. She is here, and we are so excited to have her. Raquel Braun joining me on the Onto Something podcast. I am Bryan Fenley. Raquel is known for a lot of things. She is a wife, she is a mom, and she is crushing it in the sports industry, doing more things than one. And that's usually the way her life works. Currently is Chief Business Officer at Women's Sports Network, but there's so many other things that she is doing. Raquel, so excited to have you, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I was telling you, I've been the biggest pain in the butt probably to schedule, but I promise I had good reasons and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I mean, having another child is probably a good reason, more than one now, and that is a busy plate that you have. But as we look at you, and one of the things that I noticed about you is you're an awesome multitasker. Sure,
Yeah.
you're doing what you're doing at the Women's Sports Network, but there's so many other things that you're doing in work, but then also in family. The first signs as a child that you were actually really good at this thing of being a good multitasker? Where did you notice that showing up initially?
I'm an oldest child. I think that explains a lot. And I have a lot of siblings. So I'm the oldest of when you put all my siblings together, the oldest is six. My youngest sibling is 21 years younger than me. So my closest brothers would say I was very bossy. I would use other words for it. But I think my parents knew early on and I knew early on that multitasking and getting stuff done was not going to be difficult for me. It's going to be a big part of my life.
I would think that if I were to talk to your husband about you calling yourself bossy, what would he say about that? I'm sure he'd have other ways to describe you than that.
He wouldn't strongly disagree.
There is that. And obviously, there's so, were you going to go on? I meant to.
No, say it works. You know, he knows how to deal with it.
You guys make a very good team. And one of the things that you've dealt with is this idea of sacrificing so much to make so much actually work out. And you look at what you're doing in work wise, and then you think about the family. And I am just in admiration of you in how you're able to fully embody the working mom. Easier said than done in so many respects. What does it take for you to do all of these things? I know we talked about how well you are in terms of doing multiple things at once, but people don't really see the sacrifices and the efforts and the time management and everything that goes in. How in the world do you do all of this?
It's not easy. Anybody who says it is, I would really like to talk to them over a drink or a coffee, something, because it's not easy. But over the years, so my oldest son is almost 4.5, and I think it comes with a lot of acceptance, and it's accepting of yourself that in addition to maybe growing up being a little bossy, I was very much a perfectionist, and I had very high expectations of myself. My parents had high expectations of me, so I've always strived to do a lot, wanted to do everything really well, worked really hard. And when you start to carry that into parenting and then being a working mom, there's like a tendency to expect yourself to be the best at your job, the best at a wife, the best at a mom. And that's just not reasonable. And so I like to think, while maybe bossy and maybe slightly a perfectionist, I like to think I'm a very reasonable person. I think that's been part of why I've been successful, at least career wise, for so long. And so I think over the years, realizing that it's not reasonable to expect myself to do it all perfectly. Um, and if I accept that, then I can figure out how to do it all. And some days I'm a kick-ass mom and maybe not the best at my job. Other days I'm doing, really great work and, you know, giving my kid way too much screen time so I can email while we're having dinner. But you kind of figure it out. And if you're okay with it not being perfect every day, it makes it so much more doable. At least it does for me. And every working mom probably has their own version of how they make it work, because you have to keep humans alive. So you have to figure it out.
You're pretty good at that, to say the least. And you mentioned just figuring things out and the acceptance. And I would think, like, from an inner dialogue standpoint, all of these things that have happened in your life, all these exciting things, it's really forced you, as you said, to be more reasonable, not so much a perfectionist, but also kind of fine tune how you talk to yourself and to be nicer to yourself. And then that leads to the acceptance. So, what has that journey been like for you? Because I can get this vibe from you, Raquel, that you have these, and rightly so, these very high expectations for yourself. Those won't change. But then to get to a place of, hey, I am great with who I am and whatever that is, and to come to that realization for you, how special has that been?
Yeah, it's a journey. I think one thing I'm very fortunate about growing up, my parents had, very different approaches on life and career. And I think that really helped me take varying perspectives with me along the way. And so, I've always, while worked really, really hard, uh, I've also, my mom constantly was in my ear, make sure you're doing something you love. And that is something that has been with me since I was a kid, and I hold every day. And I'm not going to say every day of your career you're going to love exactly what you're doing, but I'm a very strong believer in doing what you love and enjoying the work and accepting the process, that it's not always going to be, sunshine and butterflies and amazing. But if you know you're on the right track, or you're on a path to doing what you love doing, it makes it worth it. And I think having that always along the way, it made going through law school a lot easier, because law school's not, an easy path. It made going through kind of steps in my career, and then taking on the working mom role and all of that, maybe a little bit easier for me, because at the end of the day, I know I love what I'm doing, and I love it. I love being a mom. I love being a wife. I love working, and I love the things that I work on. So,
If I were to talk to your kids, what would they say they love most about you?
ooh, that's a good question. Well, one of them's 8.5 months old, so he would probably just say that I make sure he eats a lot, and he
It's
eats a lot.
important.
So I feed him. That's a good one. The 4-year-old, he just loves when I'm around, which is great, and also sometimes sad, because I've been traveling a lot for work, and so there are times where I'm not around. So that's what makes the working mom part hard. But yesterday I left the office early, and I just picked him up from school. And he wasn't expecting it, and to see the door open and him see me and not expect me and just yell, "Mommy, you're here!" and just run up to me with that excitement. I mean, that is the best feeling, hands down, every single day.
It doesn't get any better than that.
No.
It
Uh,
really doesn't.
and we wouldn't have that if I wasn't a working mom. I mean, maybe we would, but I think that's where, even though you have hard moments being a working mom, I actually think it's a great thing for our relationship, because he knows I have to step away. He knows I have to work. He will, as he grows, I think, really respect that. But then it makes those moments when I can surprise him so special, because I'm able to do those things kind of out of the blue for him, which are really great for our relationship too.
Well, I was going to ask you, Raquel, like, and you basically answered it, is the beauty you find in the struggle of this. And so you, in having to allot your time to so many different things, then when you get to spend that time with your loved ones, makes it that much more enriching. So I've mentioned your kids. If I were to talk to your husband and say, why are you such, and what are all the reasons, and he'd probably go on for days and hours, that he cheers you on, what is he going to tell me and why he does that?
I think you said it early on. You talked about us being a team, and that really is our relationship in one word. We have both sacrificed for each other. We've let one another prioritize part of one's career ahead of the other, and recognize that it's a long game. Like, we're in this for the long haul. And so, it started when I graduated from law school, and we were living in DC, and he had made it through the financial crisis working at an investment bank when there were tons of layoffs, and he survived. gets promoted, and then I get a job offer to move to LA at Fox. And that was at the time my dream. I had, worked toward this, being a lawyer, working in sports for so long, and I finally had it. And we had literally got engaged 2 days prior. And so I remember the varying conversations with my family who are like, "Are you crazy? You're going to make him move? You're new, he's established, all these things." And it wasn't even a conversation. He was like, "Okay, I'll quit my job. Let's move." And I remember being blown away because you just don't hear that very often. Um, but that's how we started. I mean, that was 13, almost 14 years ago. And over this period of time, a couple years later, he made the decision to go back to business school. And so I was the only one working at the time. And, he took on like an unpaid internship, which, now we're 10 years past that. And that has insanely, in ways we couldn't have ever imagined, paid off for him. But at every point along the way, we've been a team, and we make decisions together. We support each other in those decisions. And it's not always easy. There are definitely challenges, but I think it's accepting that this is a long game. And we know how to get through the challenges. We figure it out. Um, and we have a lot of these like really great moments, especially in the last few months, where we just sit back and we're like, wow, like all of that sacrifice, all of the things we've done over this period of time, seeing them pay off and come together, it's really special. So yeah, I think the team part of it is something that we're really strong at.
A team at the house, and obviously a team when it comes to working and all that you're doing there.
Yeah.
And there are so many different teams that you're a part of. When you think about all of the teams that you're a part of, how do you want to stand out?
So it's a good question. For me, at the end of the day, I pride myself on, and my expectation, I think a lot of other people, it's not be the best or, be the smartest. It's be good, be a good person, do the right thing. Those two things aren't always easy. I mean, being a good person should be easy. Doing the right thing can be challenging, but I think if you approach every day, and I try to approach every day, every aspect of my life, mom, wife, worker, and all the things that I work on, every day I want to be a good person. I want to do good. I want to do the right thing. And I think that shows through in all the areas I work on. And so I hope that anybody else who comes across me and works with me knows that I care. I care about people. I care about the work. And I think all the good that comes with that, the success, will come from if you are those two things at your core.
That was so wonderfully put. And obviously, you care, and it's seen by everybody in your life that you've impacted. How much of that caring gene that you have came from your upbringing and your childhood and the
Yeah.
love that you felt from your family?
Yeah, I mean, I have a big family. I have a loud family. My dad's Cuban. And so and I grew up, my grandmother, so my dad's mother, was a doctor in Cuba, which, at that time was unheard of. And, I think for me it's both the caring and being a good person, and the being a team and the sacrifice are things that I grew up with. I mean, the sacrifices that she had to make to be able to bring her family to the US, to Miami, to better not just herself, but her kids and their futures and their families. Growing up with that, my mom and, her, really like strong belief and kind of loving what you do and the positivity with which she approaches life. Growing up with those things, I think really molded me into kind of the person that I am now. And like I said, it's not like it's all easy. But I think when you have those sorts of influences around you, it really helps you navigate challenge. And I've just been really fortunate that it's kind of built me into kind of what I am now.
What you are now, the challenges that you've helped navigate is we look at what you're doing at Women's Sports Network, and I saw the really cool posts that you put up on LinkedIn and all the excitement that goes into that. Carol Stiff, she's been on with me here
Yeah.
as well, somebody who has done so much in women's sports and in sports media in general. So obviously there's a connection there between you and her. But taking what you just said and the care that you have for your work and what you're doing right now, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Women's Sports Network, it's it's amazing, and it's hard to sometimes put into words because it's the culmination of this career I've had thus far, working in media, working in sports, and to finally be in a place where I get to help build something almost from the ground up. It's, the network's been around for just about a year. But to really build something and build something I'm very passionate about. I love sports, and the more I've worked in women's sports in particular, the stronger and stronger I feel about how much more there is to do and how much opportunity there is to provide female athletes and these women's sports leagues and the teams the platform that they deserve, not just to show a live game. You can do that easily, but to tell their stories. I mean, if you watch any variety of sports news highlight type shows, how many times are you seeing a female athlete there telling their story or talking about their game and their path? And what we bring to the table is a platform that's all we're doing. We fully believe in telling the story of female athletes and being that kind of surround sound to the women's sports ecosystem. And to get to be a part of that and build that with somebody like Carol and Stuart, who I worked with him, I remember working a deal with him 13 years ago at Fox. So it's fun kind of bringing everybody together and getting to build something so special and in such an amazing point in time where it feels like finally everybody's woken up and realized, oh wait, like we have been missing the boat on this for so long, and everybody now is paying attention. There's a lot more to do, but paying attention to women's sports.
And if we're paying attention to what you're doing, it's not just limited to Women's Sports Network. Obviously, a lot of your time is spent there. But if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a few more things that you're also working on.
Yeah. So earlier this year, I came on as an advisor to see a theme here to a all female hosted Formula One podcast called For the Girls. And again, sports space and something I loved doing when I was at Fox was having the opportunity to provide female voices a platform within male sports. And so working on, somebody like Allie Wagner, when she came in to call a men's World Cup, it was so special to be able to work on that. When I was at EA, bringing in, female commentators into male focused video games, it was so great to be able to provide that platform for female voices. And so to have the opportunity to work with these three total rock stars, they all have day jobs. They are brilliant humans, but they're so knowledgeable about the Formula One space. And to hear them talk about these races, and then as we spent time together, they had these interests in sustainability, which in the world is important. In Formula One, it's really important, but a very difficult and really meaty topic to get into. And how they're able to explain that is just so impressive. I'm learning from them every time we talk about it. And then them wanting to use their platform to provide a space to talk about women in racing, because it's not just a group of female fans who watch Drive to Survive, which there are many of those. And that's amazing that a show like that was able to bring in a whole new group of fans to the sport. But there are women who work in so many facets of Formula One, and they're very rarely talked about. And so these women are using their platform as a place to be able to talk about those women too. And so that has been so fun. And it allows me to use, creative side of my brain, business strategy. So, work across a variety of things with them. So that's been a ton of fun. A good friend of mine, a fellow Florida Gator, we launched a soccer awards platform this summer. So I've worked in the soccer space for a while now. He has as well. And, in the US sports business, you see a variety of sports platforms for different leagues, specific to leagues or kind of broadly across sports. But the challenge in the soccer space is, one, there's so many leagues. You don't just have one league for soccer. You have a variety of leagues within North America. But because it's not the most watched or the sport with the most budget from a production standpoint at the networks, very rarely is soccer content what's being submitted for a variety of sports awards. And so we thought this was pre-Messi when we kind of built this out. So our plan was pre what Messi Baby has done to accelerate our business plan a bit. But seeing the international soccer events coming to the US market over the next few years, we thought it was crazy that there isn't a platform to just recognize and celebrate and collaborate across the soccer industry in North America. So we launched that earlier this year. So that's currently in process. And it's amazing to see the excitement from different soccer organizations as they submit their work, and like, oh, somebody actually cares that, we did these things within our league in this industry. So that's been a lot of fun. And then my third thing, which hasn't, it's sort of started, but something I've talked about since I was a law student, may not surprise you as we've talked today and before, but I've always just loved working with students when I was at Georgetown for law school, being able to create a space where students who are interested in sports entertainment had a forum to engage with alumni and learn about the industry. That's always been something I've been passionate about. I helped oversee our interns when I was at Fox. So I am going back to law school in January and will be teaching at Georgetown.
Wow.
So it's very, I get goosebumps when I say it. I just said that I haven't talked about it very much yet, but it's something I've thought about doing for a long time. And in my year of let's try new things and say yes to things I've thought about for a long time. One was how, what better way to give back and help kind of this next generation of sports and entertainment lawyers and executives coming up, then going back and teaching them and spending time with them kind of while they're in the thick of it in law school. So I'll be doing that in January.
This is fascinating. I love this.
You
And
didn't know that. So
I did not know
I
this.
guess, surprise you with something.
This is what we like to do. We like to break news on this podcast platform when we get the chance, and certainly very exciting. And you just hit something when you mentioned this new role that you're going to be playing at Georgetown, and it's this idea of you giving back. When you give back, Raquel, what does that give you?
I mean, it should feel good. It should be something that makes you. I mean, I just I love the opportunity to help people, especially in ways that maybe I didn't have the same help when I was in their shoes, or maybe I did, and it was a lot harder to come across. And so, I think as going back to where we started about being a working mom and a woman in this industry, or even, I took a very different path than most people who go to law school and end up working in sports. And those things are all okay, and they shouldn't be so hard or so daunting or scary. And so I probably didn't have enough of those conversations early on in my career to help me realize, it isn't, it's going to be okay if you decide to be a mom and have a job, and, it's not going to ruin your career or things like that you think about and you don't really know how it's going to play out. I wish I had had some of those conversations earlier on. And so to be able to give back and help, whether it's young professionals or students and women in the industry, it just, it makes me feel like I'm making the path maybe not necessarily easier, because it's never going to be easy, but at least providing clarity and space for people to focus on the hard stuff that's going to happen no matter what, and not let certain things that may be unknowns or things that aren't talked about be kind of standing in the way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And things that get in the way, you look at your life, where have you been the most battle hardened and you've had to be a fighter?
Oh, I mean, there've been a number. I mean, I did take a very kind of alternative approach in my career. And so, when I was in law school, it was when the market crashed, and I had a very specific plan. In some ways, I knew I wanted to work in sports. That was the goal. That was the plan. And it had been working, along the way. I'd had great internships and jobs throughout undergrad and before law school. But then the market crashes, and as I'm looking for jobs, and law firms are like, well, you want to work in sports, you don't really want to work at a law firm, which they were all right. I had no interest. But that was the expectation, especially when I was at a wonderful law school, where a lot of people go and go work at a law firm. And my brother, my dad, I know plenty of people who have amazing jobs at law firms. That just wasn't the path I wanted, but I thought is what I needed to do, or I was supposed to do. And so the market crashing actually gave me this chance to shake it up and do it my way, which I now laugh as I say that out loud, because that was a song my grandmother loved. And so it's kind of funny that that was the quote I just used, but and so being able to create my own path and do things a little differently meant there weren't a lot of people that I could talk to who had done it the same way. So that was always a bit of a challenge. I think the biggest one, and it was more of a probably a mental in my own head type challenge, you know, over the last probably 5 to 10 years was that decision to become a mom. And it was something I always wanted to do, but I was so afraid of because I knew I had worked so hard for a career. And I was so worried about what would happen. You know, you go, you're pregnant for 9 months, you go out on maternity leave and you come back, and then what? And what was life going to be like? Would I still have the same job? And all the legalese and all the things that can and can't happen um, in that situation. But it was more just how would it impact me? How would it impact my career? And I waited, we waited a while to have kids in some ways because we had a lot of things we were doing and we wanted to get to certain places. But for me personally, I remember, and my old boss at Fox, she'll probably very much remember this, but I said, I'm not going to have a kid until I'm a vice president. And I was very determined um, that that was going to be my rule. And I remember going to Russia, and I spent 6 weeks in Russia for the World Cup. I was not a vice president yet, but I remember having this kind of come to Jesus moment while I was there. I was like, why? What am I doing with this rule? I think I was 34 or so at the time. And I'm thinking like, well, what happens if I don't get that title? And then am I just going to put off having a family forever because I'm so afraid of what's going to happen in my career? Um, and so it's funny because I go through that, I come back, I remember having this conversation with my husband. It's like, forget it. I was like, forget the title thing. I think we're ready. At that point, we'd been together for a decade. So we were ready to have kids, fit very well in we had a very regimented lifestyle. We're like, kids will be easy. This will be great. And it was funny because we came to that decision and 2 weeks later I got promoted.
Wow.
And it was this crazy feeling of, how the universe works. And when you allow yourself to just make decisions based on what's best for you and not, you know, these things that we think are right or how it should work and not being so afraid. And the way it worked out, I had my son. I remember also going to my boss's office to tell her I was pregnant. And somebody who you've also had on your podcast, Amy Leone, I remember giving me some very great advice. I don't think she realized I was pregnant at the time when she was giving me the advice. But I remember going into my boss's office and I was like, I'm going to talk. You're going to listen. And I was like, I'm pregnant and I want to do it differently. And I did. I remember that next year, Fox had the Women's World Cup. They had the Super Bowl in Miami coming up. And those were two things I was going to get to have a very big role in. And I didn't want to lose them. And so my way of kind of taking control of the situation was I went in and said, I will come back from leave early. I will still work on the Super Bowl and then I will go back out and I will finish my maternity leave. But I am going to find my way of having it all and doing it all in a way that works for me. She looked at me and she's like, all right. And that was it. It was not a negotiation or a difficult discussion. It was okay. And it worked. I went to Paris for 3 weeks. I got to work on the Women's World Cup, which is still to this day my favorite sporting event in the world. Came back the day before my doctor's deadline. Happy I did because I had a baby 2 weeks later, about 2 weeks later. Went on my maternity leave, came back, worked on the Super Bowl, took my son to Miami. Thank goodness that's where my family is. So I had lots of babysitters, worked on a Super Bowl, came back, and then in kind of all luck, February 2020, went back on maternity leave. And I actually haven't worked full time in an office since because that's the way the world works. But it all worked out. And I remember sometimes I sit and think about like, what was I so afraid of? And I think I was very fortunate to have strong women who I worked with at Fox give me that advice. People like Amy, people like my boss, Claudia, who like, okay, like you control your career. You can be a mom, you can have a career. And to see that in our industry and people be so encouraging of making it work. That's just something I want to make sure that other women and other professionals, as they try to navigate that, they have those conversations way earlier on. I didn't need to be in my mid-30s figuring that out. I wish I had thought about that earlier on so I wasn't so afraid of it.
There was a leap of faith that you clearly took, and then, as you said, the universe sort of took that and ran with it, and you got that distinction, and you did all of these things. And I'm sure that as you now are on the other end of this, the preconceived notions you might have had in having children, those fears are nothing. They don't hold up considering what you have done. And so I love the fact that you've seen that, and in what you do, so much of it is giving back. So, as you said, there are so many women who probably are feeling the same thing. There's a stigma. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to get behind. But look what you did. And that is a source of glowing light for those to see. And one of the major reasons why I wanted you to be on this conversation platform is that the faith that you have in yourself, the belief in yourself, no is never an answer when it comes to your career and what you can do. The opportunities are endless. And that ultimately, Raquel, is you in a nutshell. And I think that those who know you know that, but there are going to be a lot of people who are going to get to know you from this conversation, just from our back and forth, that are going to see that. I want to leave you with this, and we might have to do a part two at some point, but this has been so fun. So as you think about, the roles that you've taken on and the belief in what you're about, even though there weren't a lot of people in front of you that were doing these things, and so there is that trailblazing element of you. When your kids grow up and they get of a certain age, what do they want? What do you want them to know about the fearless Raquel Braun, who sacrificed so much for them and did this for them so that they can be inspired themselves?
I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said earlier because I think it's the most important thing that hopefully they will learn, and that hopefully I show them already now. And it's be good, do right. Your mom was a good person and she tried very hard every day to do the right thing. Um, and all the success will come with that, and happiness, and all the things I think come from those two very core beliefs of mine.
Another belief of yours is that you have a pretty good maiden last name. And I
I
know that
do.
your husband has a good last name too. How do you, we were talking about before we recorded this conversation that there's this like back and forth, but like your last name, you already have a middle name, your maiden last name. So like, what are you doing now? Obviously, because you honor that and you love that, but you also love your husband.
I do. And it was a very early on conversation where I said, "Of course I'll take your last name." And then you go to do that. I'm like, "Oh shoot, but my maiden name, Del Castillo, is pretty darn cool." And so I do take advantage of every opportunity I can to give him a hard time for me giving up the cooler last name. But I was very excited when Georgetown sent me all of my onboarding information. They gave me my same email address from law school. So I was able to find emails from 15 years ago,
Oh my
which
goodness.
amazing. Very proud of young Raquel. And I was reading that, I was like, you did good. But so now I have my ID for Georgetown actually says Raquel del Castillo. And they said I could change it to Braun. I'm like, no, I will happily keep my one ID left with that name on it.
When you show him, if you haven't already, that ID, what do you think his reaction is going to be?
He will not be surprised. And because at the end of the day, I changed my last name. So he'll be like, sure, honey. Yeah. I'm happy you have your one thing with your name on it. They're still calling you Professor Braun, right? Which they will be. So
He's not going to be surprised. And none of us are surprised at what you have done over the course of your life as a mom, as a worker in sports media and in sports and soccer, and pushing for the advancement of women's sports. So many things that you're doing. And it was just such an honor, Raquel, to have you on here. Raquel Braun, I'm Bryan Fenley. Thanks so much for the deep conversation that looked at so many elements of your life, and all of them make you who you are and make you such a special force in this world.
thanks, Brian.